So here are some brief comments on the art of notebook making, the art and the practice of notebook making, which is very much like journaling, but it's a larger concept than most journaling. But we've asked you to document, journal, notebook, your experiences through these 7 experiences and all the interactions which take place in between. And we've noted that our big documentation electronically is, in fact, all of us creating a journal. Robert Heinlein, the great science fiction writer, once said, "If it ain't documented, it ain't science," which was a very eloquent way of making a point. Now, think about journaling. This is Leonardo da Vinci's notebook, which he started off with large sheets of paper and carried them around all over Europe in his life. But finally, when he got elderly and went to France and was supported, he started to pull his journals together into a notebook. What we actually have in our hands is estimated to be something like 20 or 25% of his total body of work. But what would we know about Leonardo? What would we know about the Renaissance if this didn't exist? So journaling is a personal thing. When I journal and I pick up a notebook from 1988 and open it up, the me that reads what I wrote is not the me that wrote that. I'm a different person now. I've had decades of other experiences. I see it with a different set of eyes and mind, and I learn from it. And I see why certain things came about and why they didn't. This is the famous Red Book of Jung. This was his journal through decades of his development of psychology. It was shown to very few people, but it was always in his studio, and he did all the graphics that are in this book. It wasn't published until seven years or more after his death. But when it was, people then began to understand what all the work he had done through decades really meant. Without that journal, his position in psychiatry and psychology today would be very different.
In our lives.
In our lives, yes, that's a good point. Now, this is a really interesting one. This was a gentleman who, for the last 25 years of his life, went to his attic and did a page a day in a notebook, all in ink and paint and everything, large things. And someone found it all being thrown away years after he died in the 20s. And all of it was about different flying machines of the 19th century, of which there were lots of paper reports about strange things happening at night and lights in the sky, all from California to the Midwest, but people could never quite grasp what it was. And along came a draftsman, sort of technology guy, and he found these books and he translated them. They were all in code. All the paper was in code. Translated them, and then also looked from a modern perspective of, was this just fantasy or good technology? And it turned out now it is generally agreed there were lots of things flying around the United States of America in the 1900s. And the whole idea of the way that flying developed technologically and the technology that was used has changed in the literature. Now, this is a journal in the classic sense. It is a textbook by Progoff on how to keep a journal for psychological development. The idea of the journal is one, it is a way to discover yourself because you write, you do, you change, you come back, you see. And so that's very much like one of our models, isn't it? The other thing is, All of us journaling, and history has shown this over and over, all of us journaling are writing the record of our time. And sometimes those journals found 5 and 10 and 20 and hundreds and 1,000 years later are the best record of what actually happened. As we go through a change like this, all of us ought to be writing down our experience and our contribution to it. Otherwise, the record will be written later, and it may have a lot of very false assumptions that don't do well in that pyramid of knowledge. So journal, have fun, and let it affect you. And that's why we're asking you to journal.